gentlelady from Michigan, Ms. Slotkin, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I was walking down to this hearing, I got news of an active shooter in one of my high schools. I had a school shooting in my district almost exactly a year ago. Luckily, it was a false alarm, but I find it ironic that in a conversation where we're going to be talking about protecting the homeland, this idea that we're not addressing school shootings in a real way in this body is, at this point, insane. But I will leave that. Admiral Harris, it's good to see you again. You know, the balloon, I think, certainly got people's attention in the homeland. People who don't think about national security very often were, I think, fascinated by this balloon coming across our country, and particularly given that it covered a lot of our country. We don't know if it was for surveillance, it was testing our reaction, if it was a mistake, but certainly in the wake of the Chinese government attempting to reset the relationship, it's hard to not interpret it as something that was pretty assertive. So can you give us very quickly we've speculated about what it was meant, but if you were in uniform watching this happen, how would you advise the president on what to do as a signal, not shooting it down, we've talked about that, but as a signal of what the Chinese were trying to develop in the relationship?
Yeah, I think it's and good to see you again too, by the way. Yeah, the behavior of the Chinese here is the real issue. It's, to me, as a former military guy and a poor diplomat, it's less the when we shot it down than the fact that the Chinese sent this thing across the United States on the eve of the Secretary of State's visit to China. I mean, that is just a huge issue, and it's not when we shot it down. It's China's fault, and this stuff that the Chinese Foreign Ministry is putting out, it was an errant weather balloon. I mean, they must make some pretty crappy balloons, because there's an errant weather balloon over Colombia, South America, right now also. Yeah. Must have come from the same batch.
But right? You agree that, again, on the eve of this summit, that it's a pretty aggressive move for them to send this balloon, whether it got off course or not, and the way that they didn't notify us, right? If it was a simple mistake, you notify other countries when you have something floating over their airspace. So it's hard to interpret that as anything other than a pretty assertive move. I have no beef with the Chinese people, but it is certainly hard to miss the sort of aggressiveness on this. Also on the homeland, I think a way that people have really understood the threat lately is on supply chain issues. And I come from a district, we have 2 auto plants that have been on again, off again for the past 18 months because we can't get a 14-cent microchip. Our economic security is connected to China, whether we like it or not. Representative Gallagher and I led a task force on defense supply chains to kind of pick up the rug and see what creepy crawlies were under there in terms of dependencies on China by our military, which of course would be beyond ironic. In your time, were you at all focused, or do you have any known dependencies on China that concern you for our military?
For sure, and I was more focused on it after I retired. I was asked to give a speech at Purdue on energetics, which is the technical term for the stuff that goes boom and bullets and weapons and rockets, missiles. And the majority of the components of energetics comes from China or is controlled by the Chinese supply chain.
Yeah, in fact,
that's shocking.
Yeah, that one we heard about as well in our supply chain task force. And at one point, 90% of the stuff that goes boom in our weapons is sourced to China. And no one is missing the irony that, God forbid, we ever had to go to war, that they would control the supply. I think the Defense Department has tried valiantly to wean us off that, but that is a concern. And then last, Dr. Sisson, it's great to see you. I think, again, sometimes Taiwan and the struggle over Taiwan or the debate feels very far away. Can you very briefly explain particularly what the Taiwan Straits means to the American public? If traffic through the Straits was slowed or stopped, what does that mean for every person in this room and in my district?
Absolutely. And first, let me say good thoughts and wishes to everyone in Michigan, and particularly in the high school. You know, when you were asking about dependence, the word that came to my mind was ocean. The fact that how much transits through the Taiwan Strait and the dependence of effectively every part of our economy on shipping, that alone is a frightening amount of dependence. So if there's a contingency over the Taiwan Strait, I think the global economy basically comes to a screeching halt.
Generally, time's expired. The chair now recognizes